How about when they add new maps? And what if they tweak the mechanics or even, they would never, add a different or new or even remove the racing mechanics of the current version of Mario Kart World? That would be a lot of hard work, right? Well, a free roam racing update sounds pretty feasible, right? Even expected. Says who? Pussy. And it supposedly would be 1,000 times better. What if the Mario game was just 900 times better? Hey, why is it even a sequel in the first place? Is it because it has a different name? It's on a different console? It looks different? Is it a different range of quality when an update becomes its own entity? Or is it its style, its mechanics, or the amount of work that's been put into it? It's obvious that Mario Kart World isn't Mario Kart 8 and subsequent games before their own entity. But when is that border crossed? Does that matter? Because Wind Waker seems like an unfinished game, but that I really right. Link was supposed to grow old. There were supposed to be more temples. Whether or not these two things are true does not matter. What matters is the idea. It is not that Wind Waker seems unfinished in terms of its polish. That couldn't be further from the truth. Maybe some players, the devs, the creator, when at the end of this final product, their appetite is still not sated. There could have been more. They could have added more. We should have added more. Why not add more? Why not revisit any game and add more? I'm not talking a remake, but even then, what's the difference? There is a difference, especially games that are considered bad. It doesn't even matter if they have a bad premise, or everything, literally everything about the game is awful. It has no redeemable qualities. Load it up and add more, or remove the fat, then add more, or don't. What's stopping this from happening? It's already happened, but not to the level that I would like. In quantity, it's not happening enough. What I'm interested in, a game reaching its true potential. Another arbitrary point that can only be dictated by a percentage in the majority of agreement that this cannot get any better. What's stopping that from happening? Well, interest and money. Strong enough example. If Eiji Aonuma, well, it'll probably be Hidemaru Fujibayashi directing it. That's important. More on that later. If Eiji Aonuma decided that he wanted to finish Wind Waker, I believe it would be successful. And in that success, the idea would permeate throughout human consciousness, and other devs would follow suit. Finished Wind Waker. True potential. What I mean is, there's a distinction between a remake and what I imagine when I say, let's start calling a completed game. Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royale, although I haven't played Royale, seems like a perfect example of this. My own personal experience with Persona 5, I never thought the game was unfinished, but apparently the devs thought differently, as they have added more content and increased the quality of the presentation, animations, and whatever. And another seemingly perfect example of distinction between this and a remake is FF7 and FF7 Remake. Rebirth? What is it? There's no room to argue that the FF7 Remake is the completed version of the original FF7, like the one on the PlayStation 1. The original FF7 is the completed version of FF7. Does that make the remake better, the original worse? How about Persona? I've seen barely any discussion for either games, but I'm sure there are people. Maybe this isn't a good example. I don't know, maybe it's incredibly impossible to think Persona 5 Royale is worse than Persona 5. Maybe Persona 3 Reload is better? I've seen people say that the original Persona 3 is better than Reloaded. But Reload is a remake. What I'm trying to say is, it's not a matter of quality, it's adding to an idea, the original idea. An idea exists inside the crystallized point of a gem called context. You veer out too far from the context, and the idea becomes something else, something new. When a Paleolithic man shaped a deer onto the rough surface of grainy white stone, if later it conveyed a deer in perfect detail, would that be the completed vision of the idea? Or millennia later, hammering a taxidermied stag into the limestone, so there could be no misinterpretation, no mistake in the idea that the original author wanted to convey. Would that be an update, a remake, or a sequel? How about if you were to take that image of a deer and convey it onto pottery? Would it be clear then? I think so. So basically the hyper-realistic, probably bleeding deer is a completed version. The taxidermied deer is a remake, and the pottery deer is a port or remaster. Wait, where were we talking about updates? I guess the completed version is the point of an update. No wait, hyper-realistic deer is too far off from the idea that is the cave painting deer. And doesn't need any updates because the art itself is so simple that it's the completed version on the first draw. Are you following me? So basically, Persona 5 Royale is a glorified update or patch to Persona 5. Yeah, actually, I think so. And I want Wind Waker and other games to be given that same treatment. I don't fucking know what I'm saying. Could I have said this in a more roundabout way? Why was I talking about caves again? Because every idea ever created, within its context, has an infinite number of limited variations to convey it in the most compelling way. If the current version of Wind Waker, holy shit, doesn't Wind Waker have a remake? If in the current version of Wind Waker, the only thing that was added was an aging mechanic, I personally believe it would be half-baked. You would need to add one of three things: a larger map with more islands, second Hyrule being traversable, like with Pana, right? Or more temples, basically more events. And in doing any of these events, in whatever order, Link would age a set amount. This would mean a person who 100% or set each aging flag off and beat the game would be older than someone who beat the game but didn't set off every aging flag. I think that makes sense. You could do all three: islands, second Hyrule, more temples, or you only use one of them. But if you add the aging mechanic and do none, then the game won't, in my opinion, feel complete. Also, what I think is interesting is that if you add an underwater overworld, as in you dive, it basically becomes Zelda plus Subnautica. The fact that I mentioned Subnautica kind of adds to my point. The game strays too far from its context and becomes something new, which means it needs to fulfill some other arbitrary conditions for it to feel complete. All games, all expressed ideas, all art, I believe, fall under this principle. A comic, a painting, a TV show, a movie, an album, a song, a book, a script. The lines of text that exist within my mind. To complete it, you simply set a destination, then judge how much where you landed overlaps with the place your mind conjured. Aren't I just restating something we know intrinsically? I should have done this. Not really part full title called. It's simply, it's just resource mismanagement. Why am I British? Or a lack of resources. Knowledge is a resource, and ignorance is the result of lacking that resource. Not knowing something like a game can be completed plays a part in that ignorance. Time, talent, and labor put in are all resources that play a large part. Every single bad game you've ever played, and every single good game you will play, has to adhere to the principle of completing a set of ideas, which means proper use of those resources. What's one of the best ways to make sure you have more chances or time to use or accrue more resources to complete said idea? Mario Kart Overworld Racing updates, it's updates. What I'm saying is going over your head. It has to be. Because you cannot grasp the idea of the flavors of the fruit that can be plucked from this revelation. Understand this: every art piece can be completed if given infinite chances, infinite time, infinite resources. Updates allow this. Do you understand? Everything can be updated. I like to daydream. I love to daydream. A lot of the time, the art that I love, I like to imagine the things that I felt were missing. I like to imagine the state that they would be if, I don't know, the stars aligned. It's not to say that it doesn't happen. It's not to say that my vision would be what's perfect, but there was a fear that existed when I played Minecraft, at least in the older versions. Everyone knows what it is: the isolation, the darkness. You know, the computer that I used to play with was bad enough that I had to use low render distance, creating this mist. I think that added to it, to be honest. I don't even really know what the current state of the game is, but I thought a lot about Terraria when I did play. I think it's what it should have been in terms of progression, not in tone. Not that Terraria is particularly any darker or lighter than Minecraft, but the Minecraft I imagine to make it complete its core ideas. What are those core ideas? Nether portal, redstone, building, exploration, biomes and their fauna, isolation. What was Steve seeking when he created the Nether portal? When he killed blazes and tore the eyes of Endermen? How did he know how to create an Eye of Ender? How do you know how to create an Eye of Ender? I ask myself this, and I can't find the original place in my memory where I was taught. Taught is important here because I sure as shit didn't discover it on my own. Somebody told me. But who told them? Who was the first to figure it out besides the devs? I want the game to be filled with things like this so that the point of original discovery can exist within a player's memory. In essence, what I want Minecraft to be is Steve seeking something that requires a dubious construction, or a place to explore, a monster to fight or mob to tame. Like I want people to say don't look at a guide, or avoid getting spoiled when talking about playing Minecraft. The very moment the end was added, the features of things needed for the game to be complete, it before being the game simply existing as it was purely a sandbox, changed entirely. So with that in mind, I will try to describe the completed version of Minecraft that exists within my mind to the best of my ability. I do this because I believe the ceiling is high when it comes to completing Minecraft, and also it will lead into something else I want to talk about. I do not think this would be even remotely close to how most people, especially the current and past devs, would go about completing the game, but it is how I would do it. I think it'll still provide an example of what it means to complete a game. So I'll do that then, blah 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 blah. The point of the game is to get to the end. The game itself is meant completely for the player to act as an allegory for the potential of an individual and the value they themselves and the universe has. They are the universe. Steve is seeking the end because, well, eventually, he's seeking anyone else that is like him, looking for connection. The story is important because it'll feed into the gameplay, which then that gameplay feeds into the storytelling. This story can go a lot of ways, but this is what I would go with. The world does not exist before the player spawns. Steve is something akin to a newborn. None of this is explicitly said. I mean, it can already be interpreted in the current, or at least the version of Minecraft that I played. So what is Steve? What is the world? First, we need to talk about how much of a role the player, you, plays in the story itself. I like the idea that the player isn't God, but is simply launching a program and generating a game. This wouldn't be a Daniel Mullins type of scenario. The game, mobs, and Steve aren't conscious in the context of the story. So to simplify, two things will interconnect. Steve, the character, desire to be unisolated, and the player and the game doing everything in their power to make this a reality. The experience, things you need to build and overcome, will act as the lesson the game is trying to teach. From Steve's perspective, everything plays out in a way that makes sense. His thoughts align with the path in which he gains information. It feels like he's in control, up to a point. Again, none of this would be explicitly said. Players would probably have no way of knowing that this is definitively the actual state of things in Minecraft. They simply be trying to progress. The actual story could only be significantly gleaned from the reward obtained from beating the game. I really like when things are interpreted from stuff that is purely gameplay. Like how I said Steve is akin to a newborn. That comes from the fact that when you start up Minecraft with no prior knowledge, you have to experiment with everything from something as simple as hitting a block, seeing the cracks, then hitting it long enough to break it, to then experiment with things like crafting recipes. Of course, by itself, there really isn't any actual story that can be taken from it. But if the whole game was built around that concept, whatever the case, the player would just play in whatever ways that interested them. The story, if the players even thought of one, would differ from player to player. Now a background to the actual gameplay, which would be, the first dimension would be the overworld. It can contain every single mob and boss that is in the current version of Minecraft. There would be a lot more mobs, although any ones with significant drops would be rare or have to meet some sort of condition for them to spawn. Okay, spawn isn't the right word here. You know how like a creeper ends up behind you when you turn around? Or whenever a condition is met, it would silently attract a mob and then they would move towards your location until you both meet. An example, ground eel. When placing a redstone torch on a vein of at least 6 emeralds, besides doing a constant stream of a tiny bit of damage to the player, the static mist would attract a... I want to talk about villagers for a second, and this will probably be the last time I talk about the isolation aspect of Minecraft. As though it plays a big part, the meat of Minecraft is mining and crafting. He said, do villagers increase or decrease the feeling of isolation in Minecraft? Steve is not the player isn't Steve, but the Steve that is exists through the player. Now with that in mind, I ask, do you usually build your homes in villages? Because I do not. Also, do you know how in games like Wind Waker, from your perspective, you might see a chat box, something that gives you the impression of the game's reality, but the actual character in the game, their experienced reality, they can be imagined living a much colorful life. When the game is off, it can be imagined that the King of Red Lions and Link are conversing. My imagination tells me that when the game is off, at least in the older versions, the only connection that can be made between Steve and the villagers is through trading. They stay within their roles, their protocol. To Steve, he looked into their eyes and they'd be glossy and with no light. In the sanctuary that villages, farm, animals, and pets could provide, straying further from that as you descend deeper into the game would reinforce that feeling you get when for 2 hours you've been mining and cave exploring in a straight line away from your base. You've gone a bit farther than you're comfortable with. And has it always been this dark? Obsidian would be the blueprint and the criteria of what can be used to further traverse each dimension and getting closer to the end. A natural occurring material with low crafting use, if any, besides making portals. Side note, I like how the enchanting table is connected to the nether through blazes in the way you craft it, and it only being used in the context that it is, makes it feel more like a specialized material. What I mean is, the obsidian portal is more like a simple object bordering on accidental, while the enchanting table seems like a deliberate understanding of whatever property obsidian has. Back on track? When going to the next dimension of whichever dimension you're currently in, the construct used to traverse each dimension becomes more and more complicated, a harder puzzle. I want something like redstone to play a big part in later iterations. Community collaboration will most likely be necessary, because an idea I have for one of the construction is using specialized pistons, and the thing that they would be pushing can only be moved in a specific pattern. So until it takes on the correct shape and consistently and continuously completes multiple laps, only then would the portal open. I would like it for a person to be able to figure it out on their own, which I think the construct I described could easily be brute forced by a single person. But I want complicated structures and for it to be very cryptic, like they know an object or a block or something is most likely used to create a portal, but nobody knows how. That's the reason why I think it should be centered around the community discovering each solution. The devs could even do things like adjusting the construction for each dimension so that way it stays fresh. Like they add some algorithm that randomly generates each construct, or they deliberately adjust each construction each month or however long they want. Anyways, Dimension 2, the Nether. As you probably could have guessed, the end would not come after the Nether, although I really like the idea of getting the main resource to open the end portal really early. So obtaining the Eyes of Ender and the end portal will act the same. Also, mining from Dimension 1 to 2, the experience would be near identical, besides how different the combat would be to the main game, and will only be the case before traversing dimensions. The overworld will evolve the more dimensions you traverse. To what extent, I cannot know, but I would like the difficulty of the overworld to always be the same. I change that later. Just a lot more events can happen, and there are more things to find. Now, mining in Dimension 2, or also known as Nether. Actually, let's just simplify the gameplay loop of what the entire complete version of this game is going to be. There are going to be a lot more lethal enemies, and they will rise in difficulty in each new dimension. Things you need to defeat them are, of course, weapons, and what we'll call combat blocks. Blocks that increase your movement options, buff your stats, or are traps for enemies. I'll give an example for each. A block that when looked at, the player can activate it with a hotkey, and then pulls the player towards it so that they stand on any one of its sides. They can cancel the pull or just crash into the side of the block. A block that when standing on it increases your diagonal movement speed. A block that explodes keeps enemy in place. Shoot spikes at get the idea. You need to kill these enemies because maybe they have a necessary drop, or they're inadvertently or deliberately protecting something that you need. Although weapons will change drastically, what will be even more drastic is how the majority of items are crafted. With these two new additions, expanding the crafting bench and joints. Joints are necessary to make more complicated items, and switching them out between each other, different joints, will change the properties of the items you can create. Now with the crafting bench, I'm imagining a 10 by 10 table in the menu. Don't know where it would be where you get the items to be able to craft a 10 by 10 one. Trying to configure items in a way that makes sense than it actually working, and remembering the item spots and then placing them correctly, especially in high stakes scenarios like combat. I think that shit would be a really fun game loop. Expanding the crafting bench means you have harder puzzles and also more configurations. Having 3 different ways to craft the same item. Having various ways to craft something and to change its properties. And to actually get the materials to upgrade the bench or obtain weapons. Or really the majority of things for items besides farming and killing mobs or finding treasure chests. Is of course mining. I like the idea of each dimension or materials having a specialized use. So for the nether it could be mostly decoration, things like glowstone or quartz. Joints would be the most utilized item in this version of Minecraft, so decoration would have just as many pieces that are filled by joints as everything else. While another dimension, its material is mostly combat related. Although the plan would be for all the materials to be interchangeable with each other, to either upgrade an item with materials from a later dimension, or to change its properties for a different effect. Now for the actual weapons themselves and enemies they'll be used against. Same as construction for portals, I want redstone to play a much larger part for combat as well. But I honestly don't know how crazy I want the weapons to get. Like, the combat in my mind is already pretty fucking crazy. It's basically fucking Doom with blocks. But I don't know if I wanted to, you know what, just rules cool. I'm not actually developing the game, so I'll just make clear what I want the weapons, the enemies, and the combat itself to be. Steve should stay the same throughout the entire game, no skill tree. I love movement options. Steve cannot be doing flips and shit. No dodge roll. But Litra, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. It's actually a really good example of how a movement item would work. Restrictive, and you can consume a resource to get a better version of the movement option. But does that count as something like a dodge roll? And does that invalidate some of the combat blocks I have in mind, in terms of movement I mean? Or does it expand on them? I don't fucking. But I'm imagining someone double tapping a movement key and Steve doing a dash. It pisses me off. So I guess take all this for consideration for how the movement might look during combat. And as for the weapons, I want them to be strong and creative, but not flashy. They make logical sense in the world of Minecraft. I do not want a mini shark or something like Night Edge or conventional guns in general. I know what I know. The most obvious thing to take advantage of: customization. Usually, you kind of feel like Minecraft was meant for weapon customization more than other games. Actually, customization in general for like everything. I can never know the full scope, so I'll just describe some weapons that would likely be in the game. Various nets or bear trap-like weapons. A redstone-based weapon that has a crank that takes 2 seconds. I don't know if that's super long or super short. It takes 2 seconds to charge and shoot 6 arrows at a time. A frisbee that contains a box in the center that uses emeralds and redstones. You can change the amount of seconds it takes to detonate its pulse of electricity when right-clicking it within your inventory. A slingshot spear. The higher versions would consume a battery. It does not throw or launch a spear. It stabs, then is slowly pulled in place and stabs again. I should probably come up with a late game weapon. I should probably come up with a game late weapon. But whenever I do, it feels like it's going too far from that Minecraft feel. I'll try though. Electric scythe. Steve puts out his hand as far as he can, as to not cut himself. The two-sided scythe oscillates back into one hand of the deck and to the other. You can change the length, width, and angles of poles that contain the deck, so more mobs may be reaped for Steve's harvest. Strength will not be dictated by the quality of minerals Steve can mine. In that respect, diamonds will remain the strongest throughout the entire playthrough. To dictate strength is the complexity, intelligence, and creativity of the crafted object. Now, enemy mobs. Let's go back to the overworld for a second to see how drastically mobs have changed. Combat mobs. Just combat mobs. Mobs will be different too. If a single zombie sees Steve with no weapon, they'll chase him. If he does have one, they'll run until Steve hits it, or eventually them. When one zombie finds enough zombies to create a swarm that they have determined has the capacity to kill Steve, they will chase it. Side note, hey guys, side note Steve here. As much as I would like to keep the Minecrafty feel, I'm definitely more focused on creating the type of enemies that I like in this game, in this hypothetical whatever the fuck. And I like my enemies to feel like that they are doing everything in their power to survive, and everything in their power to win or kill. That being said, the enemy mobs will have a different level of an animal that is living in an environment and having their only motivation be killing Steve. Getting back to the zombies, I know I said I wanted the overworld to always be at the same difficulty, but that's before this I do. The overworld can always be at the same difficulty, but if you're going deeper and deeper into the game, passing through more and more dimensions, things might creep back out with you. One thing that I would want that to be is bosses. Bosses, by the way, besides the Ender Dragon, wouldn't be signified by a health bar. The way you tell if an enemy is a boss is by how much more difficult it is than other enemies, and of course how frequent you encounter it. It will most likely be once a playthrough, but I don't know, I can get crazy. But one of the bosses that I'd want to go back to the overworld would start gearing up zombies with weapons just as complicated as your own, and you'd have to raid their base and kill them so the overworld can return back to normal. There could be multiple things like this, maybe some that even more personally affect Steve, presented in different ways. Now getting to describing what the actual enemies are capable of, or how fights will look like in general. You place multiple types of combat blocks to create an arena as you are fighting or before you fight. Enemies, and especially bosses, will focus on breaking these blocks, or make it so you're at a disadvantage when using these blocks. If possible by setting a trap, something like an acid, or just simply a section of mobs capping the area. That goes into another aspect, swarms and collaboration. Different types of mobs, including bosses, will work with each other, trying to kill you. There would be exceptions that wouldn't care about hurting or actively focusing on other mobs, but most of them would collaborate, and all of them will adhere to a pattern of behavior that can be exploited. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be mobs that would try to adapt or try to outplay you, while in a way an NPC can. It's more so for the reason that they can have a distinct personality. The ceiling I want for how dynamic these fights to be is, well, Steve wouldn't be doing flips and shit, but the bosses absolutely would. The player would have to put blocks in front of them to defend from attack. I'll just say who the player is going to use. Combat blocks to do damage, buff themselves or debuff the enemy, and abuse the movement options they get from using combat blocks. Then switch into defensive block facing. I'll go more into depth into this later. Utility weapon in terms of throwable potions, bear traps, poison darts, stuff like that. Then they would switch to their main weapon. Combat blocks and switching to main weapons would be the main way damage is done, although combat blocks would have just as much utility options. Defensive block placements, combat block movement, and shields would be the main way damage is avoided. Enemies, to counteract all the options the player has,
What fuck?
a flag is raised, waiting. Some of them were waiting. Any life that they lived was motivated by instinct, an instinct without reason. The moment you pass the border of green grass into the whirling field manifested by obsidian, that reason becomes clear, crystal clear, for seconds. In that time, a Steve heart beats, crossing into a boundary he can't know. A cry of joy rings out over the burning stone, a screech you'll hear the tail end of once you fully transform. Out of all the beasts, only this one had the capacity to, before even crossing, detect your location. First boss, Gazlan. Upon entering the nether, the screeches of insects, the bellows and chippers of animals, a sentiment enters the brain. This place is loud. An explosion, and another. There is what looks like something to signify sweat. Some sort of indicator over your food bar. This place is hot. Another explosion. Another explosion. You've gone out the portal now. You spin trying to see where the wall of netherrack to your left has been blasted through. A white bag with a pig snout appears in front of you. Hard purple skin on its arms, legs. A bright purple. Is that a gem? Sits at the center of its head. It roars. For what would be 14 seconds, a time you won't wait for, you turn and enter the nether portal. The roar stops. You turn around to see it and just barely make out that it now has what looks like a pure white stone javelin, a windup that lasts less than a second. Its right hand high, arms strung up, one leg up in the air, back reclining, its head almost touching the ground. A shot that breaks the air. Without fanfare, the spear is now stabbed into the top block of the obsidian. What once was an obsidian portal. The white shine of your heart disappears, and what is left? As the fire you put down burns without effect, you have come to completely understand what's happening. You switch to your redstone repeating crossbow. In your inventory waits a stack of pull blocks, bomb blocks, slash blocks, stone blocks, an activated by redstone, emerald powered diamond sword, and 3 stacks of 64 diamond tipped arrows, each dripping with a toxin. Why should you be afraid? Who gives a fuck? It's the first time you got here, but it won't take long to come back the next time. You've killed 3 overworld bosses by now, and you did it on your first try for each, despite almost dying each time. It'll be just like that. You aim at the Gazlan. It dashes away to what would be out of sight, and once there, it would laugh, and it would continue to laugh as you venture through the nether. In any fight that took place, or whatever ailment caused you damage, it would come out of hiding and inflict just enough damage, just to the point where you're right before death, then continue to laugh. That is, if it makes it out of sight in the first place. You fire your repeater. The 6 arrows shoot out in a complete straight line, each creating an explosive ring through the air, and each hit the Gazlan hard, each one knocking it back until its back hits a wall. You start running forward reflexively. After cranking your repeater, you switch to your shield and emerald-powered sword. You charge it as you sprint forward. The boss's back crashes into a wall of netherrack. Dizzy status effect you've come accustomed to. Circles on top of its head. Green sparks fly as you swing down your turquoise blade. The Gazlan's theme registers in your ears. The red hue of damage surrounds it. It snaps. A shot of fog covers, besides what you're currently holding, your entire hotbar, and once checked, your entire inventory. You switch to where your repeater should be, and it is. You switch to stone and create 4 hearts of damage. You didn't see where is it? 2 hearts more. 4 hearts left. You need a block barrier to hit it. You place a block down, wait a second, and put another down on top of it, hoping for it to align with the Gazlan's attack. Luckily, it does. You see the red and black scratchy star that signifies your success. Hotbar still masked, you try and switch to your golden apple slices. 1 heart regained, then another. You reflexively switch back to your shield, but when trying to put your sword in your right hand, what you find instead is 2 string. The boss has begun to shuffle your items. This is bad. You keep your eyes on the boss. It reaches into itself and throws a white stone ball that you block. A panic thought that you go through with. You begin to start dropping items out of your hotbar with a thieves' right hand until your shield is put away and your repeater is brought into your arms. You aim and release it 6 shots. The nether itself wouldn't be difficult, or anywhere near as difficult as the later dimensions. It'd be complicated, but once solved, only the bosses should consistently give you trouble. At least most of the time. I don't have anything against them, but at first I wanted to remove bastions and piglins, because I think they're too civilized and too comparatively cozy. For the figurative, visually it'd be extremely similar. Jungle I want, but they would be just another cell in the whole of the organism that I'm imagining. I also like them being the inverses of villagers and villages as well. The nether would be the biome with the most mobs or wildlife in the game. That's not to say that they would all come crashing down on you the moment you enter it. More that there will be a ton of encounters and a lot of them will provide a problem, like a status effect, blocking your path, a type of attack, stealing your resources, or resource. Each one of these problems you'll have to solve to progress, but first and foremost, survive. Path to the end. There will of course be, unrelated to beating the game, extra dimensions, and more importantly, red herring dimensions. As a player might happen upon a material or object, and then figure out how to make the construct, but it doesn't lead to the dimension they need to progress. That is, if they want to make it to the end. False path in the nether could be anything, but let's say there is an obsidian fountain in the middle of a lava lake. To make the portal pour out, you simply connect the quartz fences to the blocks suspended in the air to the poles connected to the fountain. Then, use the flint and steel on the tip of the spout in the middle of the fountain, and now you're headed off to the wrong dimension, or path, or whatever. Path as in there's another dimension within the false dimension. Does that make sense? In these extra dimensions, there would be things of value there, but it won't lead you to the ending of the game. The end, the ending. For the true path, you have to make a portal frame with glowstone, and then use a water bucket on it, in the nether. Which is simple. All you have to do is create a pocket portal room, a construction that mainly exists in the first place to pour water in the nether, although you can build it anywhere, using the low or no crafting material from the nether, or the overworld, creating an arbitrary shape decided by the devs surrounding the glowstone portal frame, until you have a room, and then have something akin to the emerald pyramid beacon thingy, the one you use for, what do you make emerald pyramids? Then you activate said thingy with some sort of puzzle involving redstone. Like have a piston that has concentrated redstone on its face, instead of like a slime piston. And then you have multiple pistons on the right blocks of the pyramid. I don't know, maybe I'll make a diagram trying to show what I mean, but it's just kind of hard to describe. You'd have multiple pistons on the right block. The generator gets powered and powers the pocket portal room, which then when you enter, it'll allow you to pour water out of the bucket in the nether. I don't know if you should have to go from the overworld to the pocket portal room, or if you can just have the water bucket in your inventory. Actually, no. The pocket portal room's other use is quick travel between dimensions, or just quick travel in general. To get the water to the nether, I don't know if when you have a water bucket in the nether, if it evaporates before you pour it, but in this version, it would evaporate before you pour it. You use the pocket portal room that's connected in the overworld to the one in the nether, and the portal room itself protects the water from evaporating. Like the room is filled with portal. Visually, how the fuck do I describe? The room is like a tub of portal, but you don't get transported. It's like the room is filled with portal, and you don't get transported unless you activate a lever or something. It's just the room is it's like filled with water, but it's portal, and you have to activate it with like a lever to switch dimensions. I'm sure that makes a lot of sense. Then once you place the water on the glowstone, it does not act similarly to any other portal. Well, except maybe one, but that's not actually a portal, that's more like an elevator. Instead of a whirling field, instead the portal becomes a Euclidean space. As in you look behind it and there's nothing. You just see through it, but in the front, a completely different environment is contained. Specifically, 2 things. With this version of Minecraft, you can sort the save files from top to bottom, drag and click to move them above one or below one another. There is a gray line that connects each of them. Why? If a save above has a glowstone portal, you can traverse it into the save below. The inside of the glowstone portal space is a rainbow-colored void. Epilepsy. Epilepsy warning. Has a suspended black brick bridge. At the end of the black bridge would be a black brick frame that leads to your other save, which would have a glowstone frame at the other end of it. I'm stupid. The glowstone frame leads to the black bridge, which leads to a black brick frame outside of the overworld. That black frame will always lead to the spawn of your other save. Well, it'd be cool if you could. I'm not actually developing the game. The reason for save travel existing like this is because there will be specific biomes that only appear in one save, and you'll need materials or an object, or the only way to the next dimension is at a different biome that your current save doesn't have. You can do this and not have the player know what biome they'll get until they travel to the dimension, but I think that will be very hard to make it so it's not tedious. So once you have at least one save with the dimension visited, you can create a new one and select the biomes that will appear. Hey, this sounds like a pretty good... However, you can't change what biomes can appear once it's created. If there is no save below the file that contains the original glowstone frame, should I say glowstone portal or glowstone frame? Then instead of a black brick frame, it's just the wall. Like you go through the glowstone frame and then the black bridge ends at nothing. It's just a wall. The second use of this room is for jumping the fuck off the black bridge and heading to Dimension 3. For the beginning of Dimension 3, all I know is that you'll definitely land in some water or some liquid that breaks your fall. And that this dimension, if the nether is meant to be the inverse of the overworld, then this dimension is the bridge to the core of the game that is Minecraft. I'll quickly describe this dimension. I don't remember it being a quick description. In Dimension 3, blocks in the biome in an interval of a different amount of minutes. Let's say the change can take place in between 2, 4, 12, and 24 minutes. 24 seems high. I am not actually making the game. The blocks in biome will change at some sort of interval of time. So if a mob is in a different biome or environment after a change, it could die or be saved, maybe even buffed, I don't know. You could be placed on a block that damages, but not instant kill. Like it won't change into a liquid like lava, or a vein of whatever ore you're looking for. It could change to something you want or something you don't. It wasn't a quick description about Dimension 3, it's a quick description of all dimensions. This shit ain't gonna be quick at all. Dimension 4 is the quote-unquote true overworld of Minecraft. It'd be like a remix version of the original world. Kind of like B-Sides from Celeste. I feel like that's a really bad comparison. Much more difficult and different visuals. This of course applies to the mobs you see in the original overworld as well. Like your creepers and your zombies and your, Endermans. Maybe not Endermans because there's an end mob. I'm not developing the game. But the main gimmick is quests. There will be things like trading, unfinished constructions, and dungeons. Again, nobody would tell you where to go for these dungeons. They would just be obviously dungeons, since there would be a boss at the end, and the way they're constructed, or how they look, or the you know how a dungeon fucking there would be a sort of red herring quest and a main line of quests that lead you to the fifth dimension, the cave dimension. Self-explanatory, you are enclosed. But I want there to be that if you mine down far enough, actually no. There's a set place that will spawn a large door you can easily find. It'll have a set radius it appears near where you spawn. You'll have to fulfill a set of conditions to open said door after finding it. Once you do, what looks like a carved out by a drill cave descends diagonally downwards for, I don't know, like 2,000 blocks? Maybe like 10,000 blocks. Is that too much or too? You know, making game is okay. And you arrive at the second part. This would be basically 2 dimensions in one, by the way. You arrive at the second part of the dimension, some sort of various constructed civilization biomes. The main mobs are worker bees, not literally. Also not robots, probably some sort of animal that builds the content of the game. We'll have to learn to direct, control, and defeat, but more like subjugate, to get to the 6th dimension before the end. Side note guy here, 7 is the literal lowest possible number of dimensions where I can comfortably slay this version of Minecraft feels complete for me. But what matters in my opinion is that you convey a descent that illustrates Steve getting farther from the sanctuary and simplicity that is the overworld, having to create amazing things or overcoming something that in doing so is itself amazing. And for, I don't know how to say this well, but I think this sentence might make it clear. Steve gains more control over the game the closer he gets to the end. You can do all these things with a lot less or a lot more content. Anyway, but I actually have to describe the gameplay mechanics of controlling the mobs. The worker bee mobs. The worker bee, the animal worker. There is food you can feed them to tame them. When you right click them, there's a set number of constructs they can make. There are also attack mobs you can tame. This is all to have an army for Dimension 6. Although the terrain will still be randomly generated, it will be the only world with a finite distance. The goal is for it to have a more deliberate feeling, like a Rockstar Games map or something. This shit's gonna be as good as Red Dead Redemption 2, guys. Get excited, this shit is coming out 2032, I promise. I'm making this game, I swear to God. Yes, Mojang, I would like Minecraft for $10. The entire IP, thank you. And while the previous dimension would be focused on dismantling constructions.
Yo, this is a Cascade from the far future, deep in editing. Let me expand on Dimension 5 real quick. The deconstruction aspect. The win condition of Dimension 5 is stopping the worker bees from continuing to work on the status quo of what Minecraft is. And to start working for you and whatever your intent is, subjugating them. You would have to literally make them deconstruct the unfinished looking buildings or maybe even cities for the portal construct to work, or to get a special type of worker bee, like hiding under what you deconstructed. It'd be a boss you need to subjugate, that you would need to progress for Dimension 5 or Dimension 6. Okay, done, Bart. This dimension would be focused on building constructions. As in, imagine a building. Well, some buildings will look like caves and some will look like, or more like bunkers. However they look, you'll have to use your army to finish these buildings to activate them, or more like make them as they're meant to be, which will then spawn the enemies and the boss for that specific dungeon. Did I mention that it would be a dungeon? These dungeons will act like raids, another reason to have your army. Another reason is, there will be a set number of spawned mobs, or mobs that can spawn. The difference there is an important one. One, you might have to run around the world to find one mob. The other, you'll know the places they'll continue to spawn. Either can be done well. You'll have to kill every mob in this dimension. Don't worry, they'll all be very, very hostile. Every single one. Once done with that, you'll get the blocks or materials from each important enemy mob and boss to be able to build the elevator to the end. This is evil, but non-negotiable, as I would want the community to collaborate to beat the game. The construct, the elevator to the end, will be very big and will be meant that if you make a mistake in the construction, you'll have to get to World 6 again and get the specific stacks of blocks that you lost. A way I think you can force this is once you place a block, you can't mine it. Again, very evil, but I'm sure there's ways to make this worse. Or better. I also mentioned the devs changing construction, so maybe this could always be like a community event, like, yeah, let's go solve how to get to the end again. I don't know. Now, the path to the end will look like this. Find the stronghold. Don't know how different it would be in this version. It would just be a barrier to the actual final section of the game, so I feel comfortable saying it would be virtually the same, as in extremely easier than the original Minecraft version, since you'll be stacked up the wazoo. So you'll put your ender eyes, or eyes of ender, what is it called? In the end portal frame. By the way, instead of lava, below it would be a 4x4 hole that goes down, I don't know, like 100 blocks. Once you put the eyes of ender in the frame, a small see-through field will activate. If you were to jump on it, it would act like a trampoline. There would be items, or let's say a very strong attack from Steve, that would push the field down and make it gain color of the standard end portal. You'll have to hit harder, much harder. The stronghold itself has a physical location in the overworld, but the portal room itself is a Euclidean space that exists in two spaces, the overworld and the bottom of the spawn of the 6th dimension, which you would be able to get to. Maybe there could be an item that makes it so you can consistently open a pathway to the 6th dimension through the end portal room, so you don't have to replay the game for when you get the elevator construct wrong. I don't know if I do that, since that'll make the community solve it very fast, but I'd understand and wouldn't mind if someone else did. Oh wait, you can just add it after the community solves it for the first time. Cool. This elevator must be built at spawn. The black brick frame will signify where to start construction. Once finished, the majority of the construct will be made to push or smash down the actual elevator. But I wouldn't blame anyone if they saw it more like a bullet in a chamber. What Steve will see, what he must see, what the player needs to see. When Steve pulls the lever, an energy spirals around the room, around the glass-like material of the elevator, until it all converges to the top, shooting the elevator down. Steve will have a window to a wide radius of blocks rapidly breaking around him until he hits bedrock and effortlessly cuts through it like butter and reaches the nether, rapidly seeing the sky turn into a garbled red rock until its own bedrock is broken through. Then the bedrock of the safe, the bedrock of the true world, the bedrock of the core, until you reach one more sky and fly down towards the last barrier, breaking through the bedrock of the source, into the field of the end portal frame, dragging it quickly, pulling it to its maximum tension, and by the end of 8 seconds, as the color of the end portal got darker and darker,
you would enter. The end. The end dimension, besides visually, would be completely different. Gigantic suspended islands that you have to travel down towards, build down towards, building downward and downward, activating construction after construction, killing mob after mob, until after who know many hours, you'll find an island in the shape of an upside-down cone, with obsidian pillars going sideways, diagonal, and at angles that barely make sense, with a floating crystal that has a flame below it. All of this going down to a point of flatland, where she will be. Some might have made the mistake to think that some of the mobs that were fought before were of her class, but no, only she would be a boss in this dimension, and for this entire game, she'd be the end boss. The Ender Dragon would be much bigger and a lot faster, and it would be a lot more pillars to destroy. Some would be hidden, which you'd have to mine to find. The entire time, the Ender Dragon's focus would be to protect her child, and in that protection, she'd shift the land, cause storms, warp the fabric of the world, and burn it all down until there's nothing left but the purple spotted egg in her belly. You cannot return to the overworld once towards the tail end of this fight, because there would be no other worlds to return to. There would be cases, many cases, during the course of a playthrough where death would be permanent. But in this case, you do not have to worry, and if you make the proper preparations, you'd even be able to avoid getting stuck in a death loop, so you'll get to fight this dragon to your heart's content. Your victory, not inevitable, but once done, there's only one ending to this game, but it might seem. When you enter the exit port, or the thing that appears after you beat Minecraft usually, or is it, not appears, it's always like, activates. A new save will be made, that returns you to spawn. There will be materials in the end dimension for one final construction involving the Dragon Egg, which would be the most versatile item in this version of Minecraft. You can use it to enhance everything. It will never hatch. Or more like, it can only hatch once. You make a glowstone portal in the nether in this new save and return to your main save at the end fountain, putting the egg back on top of the fountain if you took it. Then build the construct, a frame of poles with a sort of disc at the center of the Dragon Egg. Once the construct is activated, the egg would pixelize into the disc, and a new world would be born.
Or so I'd like.
So the reward I talked about, you remember that, right? You didn't forget it? There are two versions of this reward or ending where I feel the game is complete. The reward is a part of the... anyways. The feasible version is that your Steve can now enter any multiplayer world. As in, it's an over-glamorized way of selecting your character and then logging into a multiplayer world with all of your items. Super basic. Now, the version I want. And also, this is part of the reason why I think it's so important to go into an art project to try and make it complete. Because I was only able to imagine this as a result of trying to make this imaginary Minecraft complete. And I never ever would have if I hadn't. Upon entering the Dragon End portal, you are transported to a completely new world, original biome. Although it can feel however similar you want to Minecraft Original's overworld. Or it can be completely different. What's important is that everybody is transported here. And you can only get here, like the portal will close itself, if you don't have an internet connection. You smelling me yet? Steve wanted a world filled with people, with purpose. This would be that world. Before I specify what this exactly is, but you'll probably already know, let me say how I describe the gameplay. I don't fucking know. But I would like for the world to feel like when you close the game, Steve is now having conversations with the villagers or whatever species of people are in this multiplayer. For the world to feel more alive, more intelligent, and with a past. I could even see that instead of dimension jumping, you can't dimension jump at all, as it would go against the game's story. It's just infinite discovery, as a new content, an update.
An update.
You'd have to explore towards the new content, or teleport, since this place would be massive with all the players that would be in it. Can a server run this? Like, I think I almost do that layering shit. I don't actually expect every single player to be in that server. That'd be sick as fuck though. But I would want what a player builds, and I am not actually making this game. I'd also want there to be things to motivate building more sandboxy stuff, and things to motivate questing. Yeah, it's MMO. It's MMO Minecraft. Could you guess? Could you guess it? I just think the game going from a complete single player to a complete multiplayer game that you're locked out of until you beat the single player game. I know no one who would ever amass the wealth to make a game like this would do this shit. But if I made this game, you would not be able to get to the multiplayer world unless you beat the single player experience, because of what it represents. And that shit would be hard as fuck. At least beating the game. You could look at Dimension 4 pussy. At the very least, time consuming. The multiplayer would not be bare bones. The multiplayer version would have the same, if not more, pertinent
themes of the game, content. 2036, guys. Mark your calendars. After you're done with Half-Life 4, you're gonna get ready for Minecraft revitalize. Minecraft complete. Minecraft complete. Also, the idea of everybody being saved, but all having a different personality expressed through clothes or expressions or hair, because of how he is created through the player. Also, Steve would actually be able to express himself throughout the entirety of this version of single-player Minecraft. He'd always keep the same face, but there would be things like him shaking at low health, or his animation of striking getting more angry or aggressive when killing a lot of mobs, but he is incapable of actually expressing anything. Little shit like him having the same face, always silent, throughout the whole single-player experience, or even being able to select dialogue when talking to NPCs or other players like that, that wheel where you the Dark Souls wheel to other players in the multiplayer world. That'd be fucking beautiful. Oh god, this fucking guy. Also, I didn't really fit it anywhere because I hadn't come up with it until way later. Like, I'm going back to write this here, but I think if you could throw a block, especially in the air, and press the button again to lock it in the air, could be a really cool mechanic. Not air placing where you have an outline in the air and place it. That's lame. Throw and stop. What was I talking about again? Motherfucker, you're the one who added this shit. There was some other shit I wanted to say. Oh yeah. I think a lot of people would think entering an MMO world from a single player world would be cool. But some might find the single player... Actually, some people might find this entire shit incredibly fucking stupid. And goes against everything that Minecraft is. I wouldn't say I agree, but I get it. Minecraft at this current point, as I understand it, is closer to Animal Crossing than whatever fucking combat turbo craft mining world I described. Like a block berry. But yeah, did I ever mention the animations for this game being extremely important? They had to be very good or fluid. You'd have to demonstrate the lag an enemy or boss mod has when you make it crash into a wall. I would put something like this in Minecraft because I think the idea of placing a block just before an enemy attacks and the height of the stack determining if it works, like if the mob goes high or does a leg sweep, to me sounds extremely fun. To be clear about what a block parry is, if a mob's gonna do a sweep, you place one block, and if they go high, you place two blocks, and either one would get you parried or not if you do it wrong. No matter how creative or fun I think this is, parry in Minecraft just makes me feel kind of gross. It's so far from what the game currently is that it feels wrong. I don't think it's bad at all, but it strays. Actually, that's another thing. Vision and versions of Minecraft being bad, or thinking a game is incomplete or complete. I think consensus can be reached for all of that, but it's ultimately personal. I don't think Minecraft is a bad game. In fact, it's the opposite. It's an amazing game, one of the most original games ever created, although I do think it's far better modded. And I do think in regard to the path to the Ender Dragon, the road you take to beat the game, I personally think that is not complete. I would understand though if another person said it was. Man, if only we could all work on our own versions of the game, or collaborate with the devs if they want to get the versions of the game that exist within our imagination. Minecraft has already been completed 100 times over. I have not played the game modded in a very long time, but I know you can either Frankenstein monster a version of the game, or you'll have an experience that makes the game feel quote-unquote complete, or a single mod literally does something similar to what I described, to my vision, in terms of traveling multiple dimensions to head towards the end. When is an art piece no longer yours? When the majority of the project doesn't align with your vision, and when you don't have a large part in the effort of its creation. Is an art piece no longer being yours bad? Something like plagiarizing every aspect of something, but changing it just enough to where you can put it on a market, or if something like the art was never your property in the first place, and your corporate overlords throw you out, and you never work on it again, at least they make it hard for you. But how about a fan of a project, or fans dedicating years of their life, paid by other fans, or even without pay, funding it themselves, to update a game that they love, or to remake it in their own vision? I cannot see how there could ever be anything wrong with that. I'm gonna stop being cute with how I'm saying this stuff. This is what I want to be taken from this video. The level of what all art can be is infinite. Or rather, this is more the focus. Original games, remakes, remasters, updates, whatever the fuck. I believe there's a distinction for all those things, but ultimately, it does not matter. What matters is completing an individual's or what the majority's vision is and making it exist, and realizing that it can always be worked on. always means always, forever and ever. Here's a method in which I think this could be taken advantage of. Now, I have no authority to give advice, so if all this is dog shit spewing out of my mouth, sorry. And a big warning. If you like the ideas I'm about to say, but try to put them into action, and you're not established at all online, like an established game dev, or like a prominent influencer, like, I don't know, a commentator, a pro player of a game, or a little developer that is working on the games I'm going to be talking about. Alright, guys, in general. Nobody listening to you guys. Or it is very unlikely. I obviously don't think one person's work or words have inherently less value than the other, but people will understandably be more receptive to someone that has proof by the things they've contributed in whatever field they're in. Closer to the end, though, I'll try to explain how to present it in a way where it will be the most likely that people will be receptive. One last thing, I doubt this is the last thing, though. Communication between the devs and the player is key for the things I'm going to talk about. Keep that in mind. I would like if the lead game director or devs of a game and their community of players made and released their own imagined blueprint that both can add and remove from, for mechanics to change or for content to be added to complete a game. Before I get into what games this should be used for, I'll say what games not to do it for. Although I think if you're respectful and make clear you don't think if the game doesn't follow your vision, then the game will never be good or is currently bad or will be bad forever. Now, as for the games not to do this for, I think creating a blueprint for creating, and to reiterate one last time, by completing I mean when you add one thing to a game, it demands of various other things to be added, like MK World's open world. I think most people would agree being able to raise wherever you want, in terms of like literally the entire overworld, would be better. A game is complete whenever you think it is, but I think there is a point where you have fulfilled completing adding the necessary ideas, and a point that you don't. When game devs or artists in general create a blueprint, I don't think I'm better than anyone, by the way. I just from an outsider perspective, you know. I think very often they just add content until an entirely arbitrary point is met. When if they focused on building on each core idea, and the ideas in general, something much more beautiful can be made. Updates allow you to put as much time into this as you want, depending on the amount of resources you have available to. Now back to the, I kind of got lost in the sauce there, back to the blueprint for the ones you're not supposed to do this for. For the player's blueprint, if the vibe is think a single player game, or they haven't been receptive, or the player devs straight up say they're only focused on creating their own vision, you can still create your own blueprint, but don't expect anything. Or just do it because it's fun. To be clear, let me say a general modus operandi. The blueprint by the community or by the devs should be as thorough as possible in describing what would be the completed vision. Literally called the blueprint, completed vision of game. That includes things like mechanics and content in said completed vision. Is everything on? Put everything. You can also do things like voting so the community decides what's added or removed. Devs can publicly release their own blueprint so that players can know what their vision actually is, or to give the community a framework to work off. For things like voting or general discussion of what to add and remove. Obviously, devs can choose to add ideas if they don't want to spoil them. Besides for when a dev doesn't want to work with the community, how can this be more useful than how updates and patches work now? I think for some games, they're aimless. The player focuses on usually one set of things, usually balance, and the devs try to appease them. What I'm describing, the aim of this is to make the true version of the game. I hope with everything in this video you understand what those differences are. I'll now use two on first one, League of Legends. I don't know if this game is actually bad or just something that people say because it has become the norm. Like this is a game that is constantly updated. Like is it bad literally right now? Was it bad a month ago? I've never played the game, but you can't tell. I am aware of a couple things though because I have watched a little. I know for sure that the medium sentiment is that you won't enjoy the majority of the hundreds of hours or even thousands that you play. Does this apply to the pros too, or is it just like the casual experience? I do not believe this has to be the case. League looks like a complete game to me, but I believe the problem comes from every single time they add a new champion, or change the way a mechanic works each season. I think they do things like add dragons or items that drastically change the mana. I think to do this so it doesn't massively impact someone's personal experience, the dev should have a much more slow burn and community-centered update philosophy, or just put the game in a state where everyone agrees that it's good and never update again. And community-centered update philosophy that is receptive to everyone. Then communicate with your players before you ever add anything and see if they like it or not. This can be a full vision blueprint, but it does not have to be. Just one before you add something, ask the players what they think first until the majority of all players in the game are happy with it. You can even do things like catering to specific players with game modes, think playing on a specific patch version, or before starting game somehow adding more customization, or how mechanics will work before the match starts.
These things obviously can't impact what the majority of players are playing, a la rank. But I think things like customizations and game modes are a good way to make everyone happy. This is just to be thorough with my examples. It's fine if you just go with what the majority of players want or your own vision. But there's also assessing why it is that the average League player says they hate playing the game. Which, look, if the League devs posted somewhere how they've seen how players feel about the game and want to make it so that everyone enjoys playing the game for as long as possible, and then ask the community to document, like a vision blueprint, all the problems of the game, what they wanted added. This can include things like mechanics or content, but again, League might be a complete game. I don't know what you tell me. But if it is a complete game, it really only needs balance updates. So the players and devs communicate with each other and vote for what they want to be added, changed, adjusted, or removed. And the League devs could look at this blueprint as it's updated while they change the game. Then I'd say League is very well on its way for the average opinion to be changed.
I do not fucking think for a second. I do not fucking think for a second they are doing that shit.
As little as I know about League, I see the skins. Now let me not risk talking about something I don't know anything about. But let's imagine they're only interested in money, which ironically I believe they would gain more of if they respected the player. Look at Steam versus any of its other competitors. But if they're only interested in money, they most likely will never do this, because the profit isn't obvious. However, if the main mod or mods of a forum, or any established individual, like I mentioned, started working with the community to create the ideal or true version of League, and it eventually gained traction, then the profit would become obvious. And then I could see the devs doing it. Money, money, money. Again, at the end I will talk about how to make this result as likely as possible. I do think it's important to keep in mind to keep this in whatever forum that's discussing it, or creating a blueprint. And if the devs choose to use that, then great. Be respectful. Just do this because you love your fucking game. You love art. You love it all. You love. Extraction shooters. The process of creating a blueprint is the same as it is in League. But I think the aspect I'm going to talk about is good at illustrating the potential of vision blueprints and why they help complete or make the true version of a game. As far as I'm aware, there is no extraction shooter that is a completed game in my eyes. And this is for only two reasons, because the credits never roll, and you do not unlock travel to other maps with your main character towards an end destination. I think there are keys in Tarkov you can get that lets you go to other maps. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, what I believe in extraction shooters' main, theme, motivation, whatever, is saving your character and the journey you have to go on to do so. If there was never a loading screen and you have to travel this gigantic ass map towards a specific place, that when you get your character to, they become permanently safe or have some sort of ending, then I think that the game would be complete in my eyes. Like I alluded to, it doesn't have to be one big map. It could be every time you extract, it would require an item to progress to the next map, progressing you towards the end destination, the final level, the final arena. I think the best aspect of this would be the natural climb of difficulty as you get closer to the ending or end of your journey, because of how the people who will be there with you went through the same amount of shit you've been through. Also, everybody having end game gear, and then once you die, losing it all and having to start all over when you were so close to the end. I think this is very feasible to add for games like Arc Raiders we talked about. If the majority of the community had a blueprint that they ascribed to, what is this, a fucking religion? That described their vision and mechanics or something like that, I think the devs would do it. Call me fucking insane. It's very easy for a dev to get a project started for something like this. Literally just ask the community to do it for you, and they 100% will. This kind of feeds into my next one. I think only until someone sets an example will something like this be put into effect and maybe even become the standard. If one can hope. So if a future game dev or a dev currently working on a game is watching this vid, you can create or add a blueprint to whatever forum your game's community has to try and show the value of this, if you don't think all this shit is shit of course. But if you're neither of those things, have no prominence, not established, have no host, want this to happen, it's actually way easier than I thought. But I think you'll have to put a lot of fucking effort and be super friendly and not talk shit. And just generally cool dude. Just generally a good person. Before I thought you'd have to do the whole process yourself. Come up with mechanics or content and justify why they're good. Which you'd have to study the entire game and its history to do. Which would be incredibly difficult with a small group, let alone by yourself. You can do this if you're super passionate and if you think it'll gain traction. But be aware of the amount of time you'll spend, and it'll still be possible it goes nowhere. But with communication, anything is possible. Literally just make a post in a forum or some video somewhere. Do not have to mention me at all. I do not want people to think I'm doing this so people can come to my channel. I mean, you can think whatever you like, but I just want games to reach the true potential, make a post in a forum or some videos somewhere. trying to see how people feel about contributing to a place where the game devs would look at to help them create the true version of the game. If it gains traction, then mods or whoever could eventually pin it somewhere, wherever, in some form, so people can continuously add to it, and hopefully one day the devs start using it, or even release one of their own blueprints. Vision blueprints, sell the idea of the blueprint however you like. I advise to make clear that this is about reaching the true version of the game. I don't really care, do whatever. Oh, that's the end of the video.